Yes, I killed them. I killed all four. These were the words Bryan Kohberger finally spoke in a courtroom on July 2, 2025, ending more than 2.5 years of silence about one of the most horrific crimes in Idaho history. The 30-year-old criminology PhD student admitted to stabbing 4 University of Idaho students to death in their beds in the middle of the night, a crime so brutal and shocking that it captured the attention of the entire nation. On July 23, 2025, he was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. But the question that haunts everyone who followed this case remains: why did a promising student studying to catch criminals become a killer himself? If you're new to The Only Witness, welcome to the channel where we bring you the confessions and truths behind America's most shocking crimes. Before we dive into Bryan Kohberger's guilty plea, the horrific details of what happened that night, and the families forever devastated by his actions, make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe with notifications on, and comment below where you're watching from: Idaho, Washington, California, Texas. We want to hear from our true crime family across all 50 states because this case shook the entire Pacific Northwest. This is the story of 4 bright young lives cut short in a senseless act of violence, a killer who thought he was smart enough to get away with murder, and the confession that finally brought justice to 4 families who waited years for answers. November 13, 2022, started as an ordinary Sunday in Moscow, Idaho, a small college town of about 25,000 people nestled in the rolling hills of northern Idaho. The University of Idaho campus was buzzing with students enjoying the last weeks of the fall semester before Thanksgiving break. 4 students were living their best lives that weekend, completely unaware that they had less than 24 hours left to live. Madison "Maddie" Mogan, 21, was a senior majoring in marketing. She was beautiful, vivacious, and had her whole future ahead of her. Maddie worked at the Mad Greek restaurant in Moscow and was beloved by everyone who knew her. Kaylee Goncalves, 21, was Maddie's best friend since 6th grade. The two were inseparable. They'd grown up together, gone to college together, and lived together. Kaylee had just graduated with her degree in general studies and was planning to start law school the following year. She had also just gotten a job offer in Austin, Texas, and was excited about the next chapter of her life. Zana Kernodle, 20, was a junior majoring in marketing. She was vibrant, funny, and deeply in love with her boyfriend Ethan. Zana was known for her infectious smile and her dedication to her studies. Ethan Chapin, 20, was a freshman studying recreation, sport, and tourism management. He was a triplet, the only one of his siblings attending the University of Idaho. Ethan was sweet, kind, and had been dating Zana for about a year. He was visiting Zana at her house that weekend, which would ultimately cost him his life. All 4 students lived in a 6-bedroom rental house at 1122 King Road in Moscow. The house was a typical college rental, a bit run down but perfect for students. 2 other roommates also lived there, and they would survive that horrific night, though they would never be the same. On the evening of November 12, 2022, Maddie and Kaylee went out to a sports bar and then got food from a food truck around 1:40 a.m. Security footage shows them together, happy, laughing, living their lives. They arrived home around 1:45 a.m. and went upstairs to Maddie's bedroom on the 3rd floor. Zana and Ethan were at a fraternity party that evening and returned to the house around 1:45 a.m. as well. They went to Zana's room on the 2nd floor. The 2 surviving roommates were also home and in their rooms on the 1st floor. Everyone went to sleep. It was a normal Saturday night in a college town. But at approximately 4 a.m. on November 13, 2022, someone entered the house through a sliding glass door that had been left unlocked. That someone was Bryan Kohberger. And what happened next was nothing short of a massacre. Before we continue with the horrific details of what Kohberger did that night and how he was finally caught, make sure you're subscribed to The Only Witness and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. This story is incredibly disturbing, and it's a reminder that evil can strike anywhere, even in the safest-seeming college towns. Bryan Kohberger was 28 years old at the time of the murders. He was a PhD student in criminology at Washington State University in Pullman, Washington, just 8 miles across the state border from Moscow, Idaho. He was studying criminal justice and psychology, literally learning about how to catch criminals while apparently planning to become one himself. Kohberger had moved to the area in June 2022 to begin his graduate studies. He lived in an apartment in Pullman and drove a white Hyundai Elantra, a detail that would become crucial to solving the case. According to later investigation, Kohberger had been to the King Road area multiple times before the murders. His phone records showed that he had been near the house at least 12 times prior to November 13th, suggesting he had been stalking or surveilling the location. In the early morning hours of November 13th, Kohberger entered the house through the sliding glass door. He was armed with a large car-bar-style combat knife, a military-grade weapon designed to kill efficiently. He went upstairs to the third floor first. Maddie and Kaylee were sleeping in Maddie's bedroom. Kohberger attacked them both, stabbing them repeatedly in a frenzied assault. The medical examiner would later determine that both young women had been stabbed multiple times and died from their injuries. The attack was so violent that one of them had defensive wounds, suggesting they fought back desperately for their lives. Kohberger then went to the second floor where Xana and Ethan were sleeping in Xana's room. He attacked them as well, stabbing both of them to death. Ethan was found in Xana's bed. Xana had defensive wounds on her hands, showing she too fought desperately against her attacker. One of the surviving roommates, Dylan Mortensen, heard noises during the attack. She opened her bedroom door 3 times during the ordeal, trying to figure out what was happening. The third time she opened her door around 4 a.m., she saw a figure dressed in black with bushy eyebrows walking toward her. He walked past her toward the sliding glass door and left. Dylan was frozen in fear. She locked herself in her bedroom and didn't come out until much later that morning. She later told police she had been in a frozen shock phase and didn't immediately call 911 because she didn't fully understand what had just happened. The 2 surviving roommates didn't discover the bodies until around 11 a.m. on November 13th, when they woke up and found their housemates unresponsive. They called friends to come over first, and eventually 911 was called at 11:58 a.m. for an unconscious person. When police arrived, they found a scene of absolute horror. 4 young people had been brutally stabbed to death in their beds. Blood was everywhere. It was clear that this was not a random accident or a suicide. This was murder, and it was vicious. The Moscow Police Department immediately launched a massive investigation. They initially had almost no leads, no murder weapon, no clear suspect, and a crime scene that suggested the killer had been careful about not leaving obvious evidence. But the killer had made mistakes, and those mistakes would eventually lead police right to Bryan Kohberger's door. The investigation revealed several crucial pieces of evidence. First, there was video footage from a neighbor's security camera that showed a white Hyundai Elantra driving in the area multiple times around the time of the murders. The car was seen leaving the area at high speed shortly after 4 a.m. Second, Dylan Mortensen's description of the man she saw, bushy eyebrows, athletic build, dressed in black, gave investigators something to work with. Third, and most importantly, investigators found DNA evidence at the crime scene. A knife sheath had been left on Maddie's bed, and on that sheath was a tiny amount of DNA. Investigators worked around the clock to solve the case. They put out a call for information about the white Hyundai Elantra, and tips started pouring in. Meanwhile, they were running the DNA through databases, looking for a match. The case captivated the nation. 4 beautiful college students murdered in their beds in a small Idaho town. It was the kind of nightmare that parents everywhere feared. The University of Idaho community was in shock. Students were terrified. Many left town and went home to their families, too scared to stay in Moscow. As the investigation continued, Bryan Kohberger was going about his life in Pullman, attending his classes, teaching his courses, and apparently thinking he had gotten away with murder. But in late December 2022, investigators got their break. The DNA from the knife sheath was run through genetic genealogy databases, and it led them to Bryan Kohberger's father. They obtained trash from the Kohberger family home in Pennsylvania, where Bryan had gone for Christmas break, and were able to confirm that the DNA matched Bryan. They also traced the white Hyundai Elantra to Kohberger. He owned a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra, and his car had been in the Moscow area on the night of the murders. On December 30th, 2022, just 6 weeks after the murders, Bryan Kohberger was arrested at his family's home in Pennsylvania. The arrest made national news, and many people breathed a sigh of relief that the killer had been caught. Kohberger was extradited back to Idaho to face charges. He was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. And then he did something that shocked everyone. He maintained his innocence. He entered a not guilty plea and indicated he wanted to go to trial. For the next 2.5 years, Kohberger sat in jail waiting for his trial while his defense team fought to keep him off death row. The case was endlessly delayed with pre-trial motions, evidence disputes, and legal maneuvering. The families of the victims waited, and waited, and waited for justice. Drop a comment right now telling us where you're watching from and whether you think Kohberger should have gotten the death penalty instead of life in prison. We want to hear from viewers in every state about this controversial plea deal. On July 2nd, 2025, everything changed. Bryan Kohberger, who had maintained his innocence for over 2 years, suddenly changed his plea to guilty. In a courtroom in Moscow, Idaho, he admitted to all 5 charges, 4 counts of murder and 1 count of burglary. When asked by the judge if he killed Madison Mogen, Kohberger replied, "Yes, I killed her." When asked if he killed Kaylee Goncalves, he said, "Yes, I killed her." When asked if he killed Zana Kernodle, he said, "Yes, I killed her." When asked if he killed Ethan Chapin, he said, "Yes, I killed him." Why did Kohberger suddenly plead guilty after maintaining his innocence for so long? The answer was simple. He accepted a plea deal that would spare him from the death penalty. Under the terms of the plea agreement, Kohberger would plead guilty to all charges and receive 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 10 years for the burglary charge. In exchange, prosecutors would not seek the death penalty. For Kohberger, it was a calculated decision. He would spend the rest of his life in prison, but he would not be executed. For the families of the victims, the plea deal was both a relief and a disappointment. They would finally get justice and wouldn't have to endure a lengthy, traumatic trial. But some felt that life in prison was not enough punishment for someone who had brutally murdered 4 innocent young people. The sentencing hearing took place on July 23, 2025. It was an emotional day as families of the victims were given the opportunity to address Kohberger directly. Kaylee's mother, Christy Goncalves, spoke about her daughter's dreams and how Kohberger had stolen everything from her. "You took away her future, her chance to be a lawyer, her chance to get married and have children. You took away everything she worked so hard for." Maddie's father, Ben Mogen, addressed Kohberger with barely controlled rage. "You are a coward who attacked sleeping college students because you knew they couldn't fight back. You deserve to rot in prison for the rest of your miserable life." Zana's family described her as a bright light who brought joy to everyone around her, and how that light had been extinguished by Kohberger's senseless violence. Ethan's mother spoke about how her son had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, visiting his girlfriend and ending up murdered by a stranger who had no reason to kill him. Throughout the statements, Kohberger sat emotionless, showing no remorse, no tears, no reaction to the pain he had caused. It was chilling to watch. When it was his turn to speak, Kohberger declined to make a statement. He had nothing to say to the families whose lives he had destroyed. Judge John C. Hippler sentenced Kohberger to 4 consecutive life sentences without parole, plus 10 years for burglary. The judge made it clear that Kohberger would never see freedom again. He would die in prison. After the sentencing, the Moscow Police Department released hundreds of pages of investigative reports that had been sealed during the legal proceedings. These reports revealed new details about the case that shocked even those who had followed it closely. The reports revealed that Kohberger had a large scratch on his face that looked like fingernail marks around the time of the murders. A friend of his told detectives he noticed the scratch, which was consistent with defensive wounds from the victims. The reports also revealed that investigators found a Q-tip with Kohberger's DNA in the trash at the crime scene, suggesting he may have tried to plant false evidence or had been in the house before. Cell phone data showed that Kohberger's phone had pinged near the house at least 12 times before the murders, confirming that he had been stalking the location and possibly the victims. Most chillingly, Kohberger's online search history from the months before the murders showed he had been researching how to commit the perfect murder, how to avoid leaving DNA evidence, and details about the victims' social media profiles. The question that everyone wanted answered was, why? Why did Bryan Kohberger murder 4 people he didn't even know? Kohberger never provided a detailed explanation or motive. He simply admitted to the killings without elaborating on why he did it. Experts and investigators have speculated about possible motives. Some believe it was a crime of sexual violence gone wrong. Kohberger may have been obsessed with one of the female victims and broke in with the intention of assaulting her, but things escalated when people woke up and fought back. Others believe it was a twisted criminology experiment. Kohberger, studying criminal justice, may have wanted to test whether he could commit the perfect murder and get away with it. Still, others think Kohberger may have been suffering from severe mental illness or psychopathy that drove him to kill for the sake of killing with no rational motive at all. We may never know the true reason Bryan Kohberger murdered Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. And perhaps that's fitting. There is no good reason, no explanation that could ever make sense of such senseless violence. As we close out this heartbreaking story of 4 lives stolen far too soon, make sure you've hit that like button and subscribe to The Only Witness. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from one more time, and let us know. Do you think Kohberger deserved the death penalty? Should he have been forced to go to trial? What do you think his motive was? Bryan Kohberger is now 30 years old. He will spend the rest of his life in the Idaho Maximum Security Institution, likely in solitary confinement for his own protection. He will never walk free again. He will never have a career, a family, or a future. He traded all of that for one night of violence that accomplished nothing except destroying multiple families. Madison Mogen should be 24 now, working in marketing, maybe married, maybe with children. She's not. She's gone. Kaylee Goncalves should be 24, finished with law school, starting her career as an attorney, living her best life in Texas. She's not. She's gone. Xana Kernodle should be 23, graduated from college, maybe engaged to Ethan, planning their future together. She's not. She's gone. Ethan Chapin should be 23, continuing his studies, spending time with his siblings, living his dreams. He's not. He's gone. All because Bryan Kohberger decided to play God and take 4 lives for reasons only he will ever fully understand. The King Roadhouse where the murders occurred has been demolished. The University of Idaho wanted to remove the constant reminder of that horrific night from their campus. But the memory of what happened there will never be demolished. It will haunt Moscow, Idaho forever. The surviving roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, have had to live with survivors' guilt and trauma from that night. Dylan especially has struggled with the knowledge that she saw the killer's face but was too terrified to do anything in the moment. She has been harassed online by armchair detectives who think she should have done more. But the reality is that she was a college student who witnessed something so terrifying that she froze. The families of the victims have created foundations and scholarships in their children's names, working to turn their grief into something positive that will help other students and honor their children's memories. Thank you for watching this difficult episode of The Only Witness. If this case affected you, please share it to honor the memory of Madison, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan. Don't forget to comment your state and your thoughts on Kohberger's guilty plea and life sentence. Until next time, this is The Only Witness, reminding you that evil can strike anywhere, even in the safest places. Cherish the people you love, because life can change in an instant. Rest in peace, Madison, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan. You deserved so much better. This is The Only Witness, signing off.